Hello, family. Please subscribe and leave a like for us. It means the world to us. Also, share this video to your friends and loved ones, and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. Jennifer sat across the cold mahogany table, her fingers clutching the edge of her chair, while the lawyer's voice faded into the background. The divorce papers were crisp, untouched, almost indifferent to the years they now severed. She picked up the pen with shaky hands, her engagement ring long removed, leaving a faint tan line on her skin as a memory. "Do you have any final questions?" the lawyer asked, but Jennifer only blinked. Her eyes flickered to Joseph, once her partner in every little dream, now a stranger in a tailored jacket, jaw clenched, fingers nervously tapping against the table. He didn't look at her, not once. She signed. A quick, silent surrender to the hurt that had been festering in both of them for months. Outside the courthouse, Crystal Bell wrapped her arms around Joseph like a victorious flame. Her laughter was loud, forced, and too fast, like someone trying to rewrite the ending of a movie that hadn't finished playing. "You did it," she whispered into his ear, lips grazing his cheek. "She was never right for you." Joseph managed to smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. His gaze lingered for a second on Jennifer as she stepped into her Uber, her back straight, her chin lifted, her silence deafening. Crystal Bell didn't notice. She dragged him toward her car, already making calls, already planning a celebration. But Joseph's mind was somewhere else entirely, caught between the relief of freedom and the haunting echo of what he just destroyed. Something real, something sacred, and maybe, just maybe, something not entirely gone. Jennifer sat cross-legged on the bare floor of her new apartment, surrounded by boxes marked kitchen, bathroom, and memories. The walls were plain, the furniture mismatched, but the silence, it was hers. She reached for her phone and almost dialed Joanna's number, but paused when she saw the last message from Joseph still pinned in her archive. "You don't listen anymore." She sighed and shoved the phone aside. As she unpacked an old photo frame, her eyes welled up. It was the trip to Zanzibar, their 6th anniversary, back when love wasn't this fragile. She placed the frame face down on the shelf, then stood and pulled open the curtain to let the light in. "I will not let this place be filled with ghosts," she whispered to herself. A soft knock at the door made her jump. It was the delivery guy with her groceries. Life, however small, had to go on. Meanwhile, in the once warm marital home, Crystal Bell moved with the flair of a queen decorating her palace. "Joseph, this curtain has to go." "It looks like your grandmother picked it," she called from the living room, already on a stepladder. Joseph glanced up from the couch where he sat motionless, one hand in his hair, the other scrolling through work emails he couldn't focus on. "Sure," he muttered. She leaned over, lipstick perfect, and chirped. "This is going to be a new start for us. Clean slate, clean style." He nodded again, not really present. His eyes drifted to the hallway, the same one Jennifer had once danced barefoot in, humming to herself on Saturday mornings. Crystal Bell prattled on about wallpaper and chandeliers, her voice fading as Joseph stared at the corner wall where their wedding photo used to hang. It was gone now. So was she. And he wasn't sure this new chapter felt like anything but an unfinished sentence. The photo went up at exactly 8:17 p.m. Crystal Bell had chosen the perfect filter and caption. "To new chapters with the man who finally chose peace." They were seated in an upscale restaurant, her hand on Joseph's cheek, his expression caught mid-blink, though to the public, it might pass for something close to contentment. Jennifer saw it while folding laundry. Her hand froze mid-air, gripping a soft blue shirt. Joanna, seated on the edge of the bed, peeked over and muttered, "She moves fast." Jennifer smiled thinly. "Let her," she replied, her voice even. But the sting was there. Not because Joseph had moved on, but because he was so publicly part of something she still mourned in private. "Do you want to talk about it?" Joanna asked gently. Jennifer shook her head. "No. I want to sleep without crying tonight." Back at the restaurant, Crystal Bell was basking in compliments from her followers. "Look at this one," she giggled, showing Joseph a comment. "You two are fire." He chuckled awkwardly, eyes distant. A waiter approached to refill their wine glasses, and as the background music shifted to a soft jazz piece, Joseph flinched. It was Jennifer's favorite song, the one she used to hum in the shower. He blinked fast and took a large gulp of his drink. "Are you okay?" Crystal Bell asked, reaching across the table. He forced a smile. "Yes, tired." She leaned back, studying him. "Well, don't let the past steal our future, babe." Joseph nodded, but in his mind, the past wasn't a thief. It was a shadow still standing beside him, refusing to be erased by staged smiles and filtered photos. Joseph sat alone in the dimly lit home office, the one room Crystal Bell hadn't touched yet. A cold cup of coffee sat beside his laptop, untouched for hours. He stared at his phone screen where Jennifer's contact remained pinned, her name unchanged, her photo still the same candid snapshot he'd taken during a rainy Sunday drive. His thumb hovered over the call button, then dropped. "What would I even say?" he murmured to himself. That he regretted it. That he didn't understand what he was throwing away until it shattered. Upstairs, he could hear Crystal Bell singing along to a pop song while organizing their shared wardrobe. He pressed his fingers to his temples. The silence in this room was different. Not comforting, just hollow. He opened his notes app and typed, then deleted, then typed again. "I'm sorry. Not for leaving, but for how I left." Then he sighed and shut his phone. Crystal Bell knocked twice before entering. "Hey," she said, casually slipping into the room. "What are you doing in here all moody and brooding like some romance novel character?" Joseph chuckled under his breath. "Just thinking." She sat on the arm of the chair, scrolling through her phone. "Well, don't think too hard. We've got a wine tasting tomorrow with Chanel and Reggie. I want you sharp, babe." He nodded, but something in his silence made her pause. "Joseph, are you happy?" she asked suddenly, the playfulness gone. He looked up at her, startled by the question, but said nothing. She tilted her head. "You say you are. But your eyes, they're always somewhere else." He kissed her hand absent-mindedly and replied, "I'm trying to be." She accepted the answer, but deep down, something inside her curled in discomfort, because even effort felt empty when love wasn't the driver. The office smelled faintly of peppermint and old books. Joseph sat stiffly on the couch, his arms crossed as Harry reviewed a few intake notes with calm detachment. "You don't have to say anything profound today," Harry said, glancing up with a warm but neutral smile. "Just start with why you're here." Joseph looked down at his hands, clean, calloused, trembling slightly. "My life feels loud," he finally muttered, "and I'm not sure what part of it is actually mine anymore." Harry nodded, jotting something down. "Who's the loudest voice in it?" Joseph hesitated, then chuckled dryly. "Everyone but me. My girlfriend, my friends, social media. Even my regrets talk louder than I do." Harry leaned back in his chair, watching him carefully. "Let's listen for your voice, then. We won't rush it." Joseph didn't say her name, not yet. But his mind kept circling back to Jennifer's quiet strength, how she never needed to shout to be heard. "Was there someone you used to hear clearly, even in the noise?" Harry asked. Joseph swallowed. "Yeah, but I ruined that." Harry offered no judgment. Just silence. A therapeutic silence that made Joseph's confession feel like both a wound and a balm. "I thought I wanted freedom," Joseph continued, almost whispering. "But what I really wanted was forgiveness. And I didn't know the difference." When the session ended, Joseph sat in his car for 10 minutes before driving off. Crystal Bell had texted twice. He didn't reply. The therapy door had opened a crack, and already he felt the gravity of a truth too long ignored. Crystal Bell pulled out all the stops for the dinner party, French wine, curated playlist, coordinated cutlery. The guests arrived one by one. Socialites, influencers, executives who greeted Joseph with shallow compliments and loud laughter. He smiled where necessary, but his mind drifted in and out of conversations like a poorly tuned radio. At one point, Crystal Bell clinked her glass and raised a toast. To fresh starts and loving louder than ever. The room applauded, but Joseph's hand tightened around his glass. Then it came on, the song. A soft acoustic melody Jennifer used to play while cooking barefoot on Sunday mornings. He froze. The clatter of silverware around him faded as a lump formed in his throat. "You okay, love?" Crystal Bell asked in a low voice, her hand resting on his knee. He nodded too quickly. "Just a headache." She smiled and kissed his cheek, brushing off the awkwardness with another joke for the table. Joseph laughed when prompted, responded when spoken to, but the room felt 2 degrees colder. Christabel held his arm like a badge of honor, proudly recounting their Italy trip plans. But he barely heard her. In the center of the table sat a candle, simple, unscented, flickering faintly. Jennifer hated scented candles, said they interfered with real aromas. His mind fixated on that small, trivial memory like it was a rope tied to his ribs. Later that night, when everyone was gone, Christabel curled against him on the couch. "Tonight was perfect," she sighed. Joseph nodded slowly. "Yeah, just perfect." Jennifer stood at the edge of the conference room, her notepad in hand and her presence unassuming yet magnetic. She was meeting with a new client, an education startup seeking strategic branding. Her input was clear, confident, concise. "You're really good at this," one of the partners said afterward. "Have you thought about running your own firm?" Jennifer smiled. "Not yet, but I'm getting closer." Back at her desk, she reviewed timelines and deliverables, highlighting rows in soft pastel colors. Her phone buzzed. "Joanna, lunch this Friday?" "My treat," Jennifer replied with a thumbs-up emoji. Her mind wandered to Joseph only briefly when she saw a paperclip shaped like a treble clef, the same symbol on his old guitar case. She tucked it away without a word. That evening, she lit a lavender candle and curled up with a book, the noise of the world pleasantly muted. Her growth wasn't loud or dramatic, it was silent and steady. She cooked herself dinner, plated it with care, and even turned on a little music, humming as she moved about the kitchen. In the quiet, she smiled, not because everything was healed, but because she was finally present in her own life again. Later, Joanna called. "You seem different," she said. Jennifer replied softly, "I'm not trying to fix anyone anymore, just myself." They chatted about work and weekend plans, and when the call ended, Jennifer closed her eyes and breathed deeply. She hadn't checked Joseph's social media in days. Not because she didn't care, but because peace had finally started to speak louder than curiosity. Christabel sat cross-legged on the bed, her phone in hand as she scrolled through Joseph's call logs. Her face tensed as she saw Joanna's name listed from 2 days ago. "Why is she calling you?" she asked casually when Joseph entered the room. He raised an eyebrow. "Who?" "Joanna. Jennifer's best friend," she clarified, voice tightening. "We ran into each other. It was 2 minutes. She asked about work." Christabel didn't respond right away. Instead, she tossed the phone on the bed and stood up, arms crossed. "I just don't get why you have to speak to anyone connected to her. You're with me now. I shouldn't have to worry about the ghost of your ex haunting our relationship." Joseph stared at her in silence, unsure whether to comfort her or defend his own peace. In the end, he walked past her, mumbling, "We're not haunted. You're just loud." Later that night, she lay beside him, eyes wide open while his breathing steadied in sleep. Her mind raced with imagined conversations, private messages, and secret plans. She began checking his location history, rereading old comments on Jennifer's page, looking for clues where there were none. In public, she doubled down, posting boomerangs of their brunch dates, tagging him with captions like, "Every day with you is peace." Her friends noticed the desperation beneath the polish, but no one said anything. Joseph, meanwhile, became increasingly distant, spending more time in his office, asking for space under the guise of deadlines. Christabel tried to initiate intimacy, plan spontaneous getaways, even suggested they adopt a puppy. But his responses were always delayed, absent, or indifferent. She began to wonder, was she trying to keep a man or fight off a memory? The air in Harry's office felt heavier that day. Joseph sat hunched forward, his hands knotted in front of him. "She's spiraling," he said plainly. "Everything is a performance with her, and I'm exhausted by the applause I didn't ask for." Harry gave a soft nod, letting the silence stretch between them before speaking. "And the exhaustion, what's at the core of it?" Joseph looked up, pain flashing behind his eyes. "I miss quiet, not silence, just that feeling of being understood without having to perform." Harry closed his notebook gently. "Was there ever someone who gave you that?" Joseph hesitated, then whispered, "Jennifer." She didn't fill the room with noise. She filled it with safety. That confession made his throat tighten. He looked away, ashamed, not of the truth, but of how long it took him to say it out loud. Harry leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Joseph, this isn't about choosing between two women. This is about choosing whether or not you're capable of doing right by the one you hurt. Joseph swallowed hard. I ruined her. She trusted me with her silence, and I shattered it. He leaned back, a bitter laugh escaping. I thought I left to find freedom, but all I found is noise. Harry didn't try to fix it. He simply asked, "If she were in this room now, what would you say?" Joseph looked toward the empty chair across from him, imagining Jennifer sitting there in her calm, observant way. "I'd say, I understand now, and I'm sorry for breaking something I didn't know how to value." Tears gathered at the corners of his eyes. Harry handed him a tissue and said softly, "Then maybe it's time to stop looking backward and start walking forward with truth." Joanna hadn't intended to go into the pharmacy. It was supposed to be a quick stop for cough drops. But when she spotted Joseph at the counter, her instincts kicked in. He was talking quietly to the pharmacist, trying to be discreet as he picked up a refill. She waited by the greeting cards, pretending to browse, until she caught a glimpse of the label. Antidepressants. Her brow furrowed. Joseph was many things, but he never used to be this. Dimmed, he turned and spotted her. For a second he froze. Then a small smile tugged at his lips. "Hey," he said, stuffing the paper bag into his coat pocket. "Didn't expect to see you here." Joanna gave a polite smile. "Neither did I. You okay?" He nodded too quickly. "Just a sinus infection." They exchanged a few more surface-level pleasantries before she let him walk away. But something tugged at her, his eyes. They weren't tired from work. They were heavy with something deeper. That evening, Joanna stopped by Jennifer's place. "Have you spoken to him lately?" she asked. Jennifer looked up from her laptop, surprised. "Why would I?" Joanna hesitated, then said, "I saw him today." He looked broken. Jennifer's face remained calm, but her fingers paused on the keyboard. "He made his choices, Joe," Joanna nodded. "I know. I'm just not sure he knows what he's living in right now is one of them." Jennifer didn't respond. But long after Joanna left, she sat in silence, the echo of her friend's words tugging at something she had buried. Not hope, but something softer. Something she wasn't ready to name. It was supposed to be a simple search for a charger. Christabel rifled through the drawers in Joseph's office, humming to herself, until her fingers paused on a worn notepad wedged between a stack of unopened letters. Curiosity took over. She flipped through the pages, expecting random work scribbles or forgotten passwords, but her eyes stopped at a phrase written in firm, unmistakable handwriting. "Forgiveness is earned, not forced." It wasn't dated, but the ink was fresh. A tightening formed in her chest. She flipped the page and saw another line. "If she ever speaks to me again, I will listen instead of reacting." Christabel slowly lowered herself into the chair, her stomach nodding as the illusion of certainty began to unravel. These weren't just journal entries. They were confessions, and none of them were about her. When Joseph returned that evening, Christabel was unusually quiet, sitting cross-legged on the couch, arms folded. He noticed the notepad on the table, its pages neatly closed. "Did you go through my things?" he asked, voice calm but edged. She didn't deny it. "What are you doing, Joseph? Who are you writing to in those pages?" He ran a hand through his hair. "No one. It's just therapy exercises." "Therapy about what?" she snapped. "Because it's clearly not about us." He met her eyes and replied gently, "Because the damage I need to understand didn't start with you." Christabel stood abruptly. "So I'm the rebound? The one you're testing your healing on while your heart still belongs to someone else?" Joseph didn't answer. That silence to her was confirmation. She walked out of the room, but not before muttering under her breath, "If she takes you back, I hope she never forgets that you left her first." Jennifer was sipping chamomile tea at her kitchen table when the email arrived. The subject line was blank, the sender anonymous. Attached was a short video file named simply August MP4. Her curiosity wrestled with caution, but she clicked. The screen faded into footage of her standing on a beach, wind catching her braids as she laughed and held her sandals in one hand. It was a memory she barely remembered, but the way she laughed, the way the camera followed her gently, it had to be Joseph filming. No voice, no message, just a quiet, intimate moment from a time when love was still their language. The screen went black. Jennifer closed her laptop slowly. her heartbeat drumming steadily. Who sent it? And why now? Later that night, she paced her room, restless. She hadn't spoken to Joseph in months, hadn't responded to any of the indirect signals Joanna mentioned. But this was different. It wasn't flashy or apologetic, it was raw, unfiltered. A part of her wanted to delete it and move on. Another part wanted to watch it again. Instead, she called Joanna. "I got something strange," she said. "A video from someone of me before everything." Joanna's voice softened. "Do you think he sent it?" Jennifer hesitated. "I don't know. But whoever did, they remembered me happy. And right now, that's messing with me more than any apology could." She didn't reply to the email. She didn't need to. But something inside her had been disturbed, gently, painfully, and the silence that followed wasn't as peaceful as it had been just a day before. Joseph sat on the couch in Harry's office with a restlessness he couldn't mask. His foot tapped anxiously, his hands wringing as if trying to squeeze something intangible out of his palms. "I'm losing the woman I'm with and still grieving the one I walked away from," he said, voice low. Harry stayed quiet. "Christabel knows I'm not fully present. And Jennifer, she won't even look in my direction. Maybe that's what I deserve." He paused, then added more quietly, "But what if the person I became after all this is finally someone worth showing up for?" Harry finally leaned forward. "Then you need to stop performing and start pursuing truth, not outcomes." Joseph blinked. "What if the truth is that I want a second chance? With Jennifer?" Harry didn't flinch. "Then you have to let go of trying to win. You need to repair." Joseph sat back, eyes glassy. "Christabel is noise," he said slowly. "Jennifer was rhythm. I miss rhythm." The room was still. I remember how she used to wait before speaking, like she was measuring her words to protect both of us from harm. Christabel doesn't wait. She just talks. And I let her, because I was too afraid to sit with the silence Jennifer once offered me. Harry smiled softly. That silence wasn't empty. It was trust. You're only now learning how to live in it. Joseph nodded. I'm ready to earn that silence again. Even if she never gives it back, I want her to know that I understand it now. For the first time since starting therapy, his words didn't feel like confessions. They felt like intentions. And that shift, though small, was the start of something deeper than redemption. It was clarity. It wasn't a coincidence. Joanna spotted him in the quiet aisle of the bookstore, his fingers tracing the spine of The Sun Sets Quietly, a novel Jennifer used to reread every autumn. She watched him for a moment before stepping forward. Interesting choice, she said, casually plucking another title from the shelf. Joseph looked up, startled, and then forced a tight smile. Didn't expect to see you here. Joanna tilted her head. You didn't come here for the book, Joseph. You came here for the memory. He looked away, clearly exposed. Maybe I came to remember who I used to be, he murmured. She narrowed her gaze. Or maybe you're trying to rewrite history in your favor. But you can't do that by haunting her favorite places. Joseph's shoulders dropped. I'm not here to make excuses, Joanna. I'm here to feel close to something I broke without understanding it. She crossed her arms, watching him intently. Then why haven't you said anything to her? Why all the shadows and whispers? His voice cracked slightly. Because I don't want to disrupt her peace. I don't deserve that right. Joanna exhaled, a blend of frustration and reluctant compassion in her expression. Peace doesn't mean silence, Joseph. Sometimes it means hearing the truth and knowing what to do with it. He nodded slowly, gripping the book tighter. I'm not asking her to take me back. I just want her to know. I'm not the same man who left. Joanna stared at him for a beat longer, then said quietly, Don't waste your words in hiding. She may not be waiting, but she still deserves the truth. Christabel stood at the vanity, applying her lipstick with calculated precision, her reflection poised yet hollow. Joseph sat on the edge of the bed behind her, scrolling through his phone but barely looking at the screen. We should take a weekend trip, she said suddenly. Somewhere quiet, you and me, no distractions. He nodded, not really hearing. Sure. She turned, placing her hands on her hips. Can you at least pretend to care? Joseph blinked. I'm just tired. Long week. She approached him slowly. You've been tired for a month, and I'm not stupid, Joseph. I can feel the distance. His jaw tightened. It's not about you. Isn't it? She shot back. Because I feel like I'm dating a memory. That night, she booked a getaway without his input, oceanfront, candles, expensive wine. But even there, on the balcony under a velvet sky, Joseph sat in silence. She brought 2 glasses of wine, placed one beside him, and said softly, "You're not here with me." He didn't argue. "Instead," he replied, "do you ever feel like you're in the wrong chapter of someone's life?" She flinched. "What's that supposed to mean?" He finally turned to face her. "I think I mistook healing for distraction. I used you to fill a void I didn't know how to sit with." Christabel's hands trembled as she placed her glass down. "So, what now? You leave me for your past?" He shook his head. "I'm not trying to relive anything. I'm trying to grow up. And you deserve more than someone halfway here." Her silence was sharp, but behind her anger was a heartbreak she didn't yet know how to name. The coffee shop was warm, filled with chatter and the smell of cinnamon. Jennifer sat across from Eric, a kind-hearted coworker who had quietly admired her from afar. "I know this is a little bold," he said with a nervous smile, "but would you ever consider going out with me sometime? Just dinner. No pressure." Jennifer smiled, stirred her tea slowly, and sighed. "That's kind of you, Eric, really. But I'm not ready." He nodded, visibly disappointed but gracious. "Still healing." She nodded, still rebuilding. There was no bitterness in her voice, just honesty. He respected that. "Well," he said, rising with a smile, "you deserve joy, even if it takes time to accept it." Later that night, Jennifer walked home in the soft drizzle, umbrella in hand, lost in thought. She wasn't waiting for Joseph, but she also wasn't interested in replacements. What she craved now wasn't romance, it was wholeness. She lit her favorite candle and sat by the window, watching raindrops slide down the glass. Joanna called to check in. "How did it go?" she asked. "He was lovely," Jennifer replied. And still, I couldn't bring myself to say yes. Joanna was quiet for a moment. "Because you're still tethered to the past?" "No," Jennifer said gently, "because I'm finally tethered to myself." She hung up and reached for her journal, her pen gliding across the page as she wrote, "I am not broken. I am learning my shape again." And for the first time in a long time, the silence in the room didn't feel lonely, it felt earned. The small velvet box sat in Joseph's palm like a weight he couldn't shake. It had been tucked in the corner of his closet for months, Jennifer's gold pendant necklace, the one she used to wear when she was anxious or needed grounding. He remembered the day he gave it to her, a quiet moment on their 5th anniversary, no grand speeches, just a whispered, "For everything you carry." Now, as he stared at it again, he felt the irony. She had carried everything, including his shortcomings, until she could no longer bear it. That evening, he stood outside her apartment building for nearly an hour, hidden in his car as rain streaked across the windshield. He didn't call. He didn't try to speak. He simply handed it to the doorman with an envelope. Inside was the necklace and a handwritten note. "It was always yours, even when I wasn't." Jennifer returned home late from a meeting, umbrella dripping at her door. "Package for you," the doorman said casually. She took it with one hand, not expecting much, but her steps slowed the moment she felt the weight of the box. At her kitchen table, she opened it slowly. The necklace lay coiled in the box like a memory she had tried to forget. The note was brief, but her fingers trembled as she reread it. She didn't cry. She didn't smile either. She just sat there, tracing the pendant with her thumb. Joanna called as she sat in the quiet. "You okay?" she asked. "He sent something back," Jennifer said softly. "What did he say?" Joanna asked. Jennifer looked at the necklace one more time. "Not much, but it felt like it wasn't about getting me back. It felt like letting go." She didn't respond to the note, but she placed the necklace on her nightstand, not out of nostalgia, but because she needed to decide what to do with the parts of herself she'd once shared so freely. Christabel stood in front of the mirror, examining herself with a critical eye. Her dress was flawless, her makeup impeccable, but none of it felt like enough. Joseph had become quieter with each passing day, retreating into thoughts she couldn't penetrate. "Do you still love me?" she asked one evening, unprovoked. He looked up from his book, startled. "Why would you ask that?" "Because I don't feel it," she replied, voice trembling despite her effort to sound firm. "You're here, but not really. You look at me, but it's like you're looking through me." Joseph sighed and closed the book. I don't know how to be what you want when I'm still learning how to be honest with myself. That answer made her chest ache. Just tell me. Are you still in love with her? He didn't flinch. He didn't lie either. I never stopped. I just stopped being worthy of her. Christabel turned away sharply, biting her lip to hold back tears. Then why are you still here? She asked. Because I thought I could outrun the truth, he answered. But now I know I can't build a future while dragging around the ruins of my past. She said nothing for a long time. The silence between them was no longer heavy with potential. It was simply hollow. That night, she scrolled through their old photos, the captions now feeling like satire. She reread her own posts, "He loves me now," and realized they had become more like affirmations for herself than reflections of reality. For the first time, Christabel questioned not just his love, but her worth outside of being wanted. The ache of being a placeholder was worse than being alone. The session felt different that week. Joseph walked into Harry's office more grounded, less frantic. After settling in, Harry leaned forward, hands clasped. Joseph, I want to shift something today. Less about the past, more about action. Joseph nodded slowly, already anticipating what was coming. If you're serious about closure or repair, then your intentions need weight. Not through gifts, not through grand gestures, through accountability. Joseph sat back thoughtful. So what do I do? Harry pulled a small card from his notepad and slid it across. Written on it were 3 phrases. Acknowledge the harm. Don't ask for anything. Accept the outcome. Joseph stared at it in silence. That's all, he asked. Harry nodded. That's everything. As Joseph drove home, those words echoed louder than anything he had rehearsed before. He thought about all the times he had tried to fix things by fixing perception, not impact. He pulled into his driveway and sat for a while. That night, instead of drafting a message or another letter, he picked up a fresh notebook and began writing, not for Jennifer, not for Christabel, but for himself. I blamed distance. I blamed timing. But the truth is, I never paused long enough to see how much damage I caused while defending my own story. He wrote for hours, reliving memories with honesty, not romance. And when he finally closed the book, he looked into the mirror and said aloud, If she never speaks to me again, I will still be a better man for having understood why. And for the first time, he believed it. It was midnight when Joseph lit the small candle on his desk and opened the blank page of his letterhead. There was no template for what he needed to say, no right format for the kind of apology he was crafting. He began simply, Jennifer, I don't expect a reply. But I can't let another day pass without speaking from a place I should have discovered long ago. He wrote about the overlooked wounds, the countless moments he'd minimized her feelings, and how her quiet strength had never asked for perfection, only presence. The words came in steady waves, each one raw, unpolished, but honest. He wrote about therapy, about confronting the part of himself that confused passion with control and silence with detachment. He ended the letter with, Whether or not you ever speak to me again, I want you to know, your love taught me what stillness meant. I carry it now with reverence. He folded the letter carefully, sealed it in an envelope, and wrote her name across the front, but not the address. He stared at it for a long while, then opened the drawer and placed it beside the notepad from earlier sessions. It didn't feel like avoidance. It felt like surrender. Not everything needed to be delivered to be released. The healing had come in the writing, not the mailing. That night, Joseph slept without dreams for the first time in months. Meanwhile, across town, Jennifer sat on her balcony, watching the quiet movement of the streetlights against the pavement. She didn't know it, but something had shifted in the air, something invisible but real. A burden she hadn't been carrying began to lift anyway. And that, perhaps, was the strange thing about closure. It sometimes arrives when the apology stays unsent, but the lesson is deeply lived. Jennifer's week had been full, presentations, mentoring sessions, late-night editing on a pitch proposal. She barely noticed the envelope tucked among the business mail until her fingers brushed its texture. Thick, matte ivory paper with her name handwritten in cursive ink. Inside was a formal invitation to speak at a mentorship conference for women in leadership, sponsored by a private donor. It wasn't until she scanned the footer that her eyes froze. Event funded by Raymond & Co. Initiative. Her breath caught. She hadn't seen that name in an official capacity in over a year. And now, here it was, on an opportunity she had unknowingly accepted. She sat at her desk, staring at the card like it might change. It didn't. The silence that followed was both unsettling and illuminating. She picked up the phone to call Joanna, but stopped herself. She needed to feel this without interruption. Later, when they met for coffee, Jennifer mentioned it casually. "Guess who's sponsoring my next speaking event?" Joanna's eyes widened. "No," Jennifer nodded. "I don't know if he knew I'd be invited, but something tells me it wasn't accidental." Joanna took a long sip of her drink. "What are you going to do?" Jennifer folded her hands, thinking, "Speak. That's all I was invited to do. That's all I'll give." But inside she was conflicted. Not because she still loved him, but because, for the first time, it felt like he might have stopped trying to be heard and started trying to listen. She didn't know what that meant yet, but she intended to find out on her own terms, in her own time. Christabel sat by the edge of the infinity pool, the city skyline glinting behind her. Her phone hovered as she debated between captions. She finally typed, "He loves me now." And that's all that matters, and hit post, watching the likes pour in. It was a performance, a curated moment of control. But the truth gnawed at her. Joseph had been absent from their last 3 dinners, claiming client meetings she no longer bothered to confirm. And when he was home, he was quiet, distant, a body without direction. Her friends noticed too. One messaged privately, "Are you okay? You seem off." She replied with a forced, "We're great," but the lie sat heavy in her chest. Later that night, she checked the post again, 300 likes, but no comment from Joseph. Not even a like. Her fingers hovered over the delete button, then fell. She closed the app and opened their messages, scrolling through weeks of blue bubbles with no warmth in them. She typed, "Do you still want this?" but didn't send it. Instead, she opened her gallery and stared at an old picture of them, his hand on her waist, her smile effortless. But even then, she remembered he had pulled away just after the photo was taken. She began to wonder if she'd ever truly had him, or if she had only been holding the space where Jennifer used to be. And that realization, unspoken but sharp, left a crack she could no longer cover with filters or hashtags. The morning was cloudy when Joseph arrived at Harry's office, his demeanor more centered than usual. He didn't wait for questions. As soon as he sat down, he looked Harry in the eye and said, "I've been scared of vulnerability all my life. It always felt like surrender meant defeat. But now, I think silence has been the thing defeating me." Harry leaned back, hands folded. "So what do you want to do about it?" Joseph exhaled slowly. "I want to stop hiding behind dignity. I want to tell her the truth, even if she laughs, even if she walks away." Harry nodded, letting the moment settle. "You don't owe her a performance. You owe her sincerity." Joseph hesitated, then added, "I'll kneel in public if I have to. I'll weep in front of strangers if that's what it takes. Because for the first time, I'm not chasing her back. I'm owning what I broke." Harry leaned forward, his tone calm but firm. "If this is about atonement, let it be clean. Don't confess to be forgiven. Confess to be free." Joseph closed his eyes, gripping the arms of the chair. "I've rehearsed so many versions of how I'd say it, but the only one that feels real is the one where I don't ask for a second chance. I just show her I've changed." Harry smiled faintly. "That's the difference between guilt and growth." Joseph nodded. "I don't want to be remembered as the man who apologized too late. I want to be remembered as the one who finally meant it when it no longer served him to say it." And with that, he stood, shaking Harry's hand. "Next time I see her," Joseph said with conviction, "I'm going to speak without trying to convince her. Just speak." It started with a shaky breath and a desperate lie. "Joseph," Christabel said one evening as he packed for a work trip, "I think I'm pregnant." His hand froze mid-fold. He looked at her, his expression unreadable. "You think?" he asked quietly. She shrugged, feigning uncertainty. "I'm late, nauseous. I haven't taken a test yet, but I just feel different." There was a pause, long enough for tension to grow between them like a wall. "If it's true," he said calmly, "we'll figure it out. But if it's not, please don't use this as another way to keep me here." Her stomach twisted. "What's that supposed to mean?" she asked, voice sharp. "It means I've seen you try to script our story before," he replied. "And I'm tired of being edited into a narrative that doesn't fit." Later that night, while Christabel slept fitfully, Joseph quietly stepped out to the pharmacy. He returned with a test and placed it on the bathroom counter without a word. The next morning, she avoided eye contact as he passed her a bottle of water. "Take it," he said softly. She did. The result came back negative, clear, undeniable. She crumbled onto the bathroom floor, pressing her palms to her face. "I didn't know what else to do," she whispered. "I could feel you leaving me inch by inch." Joseph sat across from her, his expression pained but resolute. "I was never fully here, Crystal. And I think you knew that from the beginning." Her tears came freely now. "So that's it?" He nodded. "It has to be. Staying would only make us both smaller." There was no yelling, no slammed doors, just the quiet end of something that never truly began in truth. The auditorium buzzed with low conversations and camera flashes as Jennifer waited backstage, holding her speech cards with steady hands. She had rehearsed every line, but tonight wasn't about perfect delivery, it was about being fully present. Her name was called, and the applause washed over her as she stepped into the spotlight. The podium stood like a familiar friend. She glanced up briefly, scanning the crowd, and her breath caught for just a second. In the very back row, partially obscured by shadows, sat Joseph. He wasn't recording. He wasn't moving, just watching. She took a deep breath and began. "Growth is rarely loud. It's not always a breakthrough. Sometimes it's just learning to stay when things get hard, or choosing yourself when silence becomes too heavy." Her words flowed, not rehearsed, but lived. She spoke about failure, forgiveness, and the quiet resilience of choosing self-respect over retaliation. The room hung on her every word, but she wasn't speaking for them. She was speaking for the woman she used to be, the one who dimmed her light so someone else could shine, who waited too long for an apology that never came. "If you've ever had to grieve someone still living," she said, her voice steady, "then you understand the strength it takes to let go without closure." A hush fell across the room. Even Joseph leaned forward slightly, his eyes glistening. As she concluded, she looked up, straight toward the back, and for a moment their eyes met. No anger, no pleading. Just a shared acknowledgement of time past and truths unearthed. She ended with a line that wasn't on her cards. "We become who we need when we stop waiting for who we lost." Joanna didn't wait for an invitation that evening. She let herself into Jennifer's apartment with a quiet knock and a bottle of wine. "You saw him, didn't you?" she asked before sitting down. Jennifer nodded slowly. "At the event, he didn't say a word." Joanna poured them both a glass and leaned forward. "He won't, not unless it's real this time. And from what I've seen, Jennifer, I think it is." Jennifer arched an eyebrow. "You've seen?" Joanna hesitated, then placed her phone gently on the table. "He's been going to therapy, consistently. I only found out through a friend who works at the clinic. He never asked her to tell me, never told anyone. It's been private, quiet, like someone finally growing, not performing." Jennifer sat back, her glass untouched. "Why didn't you tell me earlier?" "Because I didn't want to give you hope where there might be none." Jennifer stood and walked to the window, arms folded. "I don't know what to feel, Joe. Part of me wants to block it all out. The other part can't ignore that he's no longer trying to fix me, but himself." Joanna joined her at the window. "I'm not saying take him back. I'm saying see the full picture before you decide what to do with the frame." Jennifer looked over at her friend, eyes thoughtful but guarded. "Do you think people really change?" Joanna responded gently. "I think pain forces people to choose, stay broken or break open. He chose the latter. That has to mean something." Jennifer said nothing more that night, but later she opened the drawer where she had stored the pendant, and beside it she placed the wine cork. A reminder of a conversation she wasn't ready to have with him, but was finally beginning to have with herself. It wasn't planned, not rehearsed. Joseph had spent the whole morning pacing outside the cafe where he knew Jennifer often stopped on Saturdays. When she finally emerged, clutching a coffee in her notebook, she nearly walked past him. "Jennifer," he called, voice steady but soft. She turned, startled, but didn't speak. "I won't take long," he said, taking a step closer. I'm not here to make a scene. I'm here because I don't want to hide behind the things I used to. Curious eyes began to turn toward them, and a few people paused mid-step. But Joseph didn't care. He gently lowered himself to one knee, not in a plea for romance, but in a symbol of full accountability. I hurt you in ways I didn't understand back then. I broke trust, made you question your worth, and masked it all in pride. I know now that sorry doesn't erase anything, but silence won't restore it either. Jennifer stood frozen, her fingers tightening around her coffee cup. He continued, not rushing, not performing. I'm not asking for you to come back. I'm not asking for your forgiveness today, or ever. I just needed to say this out loud. Where I once failed in private, I now choose to take responsibility in public. A few gasps rippled among the bystanders, one person even lifting their phone to record. But Joseph remained still, focused only on her. Jennifer slowly walked toward him. Get up, she said quietly. He rose. For a moment, they stood there, the world watching something that wasn't spectacle, but transformation. You're right, she said finally. You can't undo what's done. But thank you for showing up this time, without needing to be rescued. She walked away, but this time her pace was slower. And Joseph, as he stood there alone, knew he had finally said everything that needed to be said. Crystal Bell had followed the trail from social media. A friend sent her the clip that was already gaining traction online. Isn't this your man? The message read. Her heart pounded as she clicked the video. There he was, kneeling, eyes full, voice trembling, and none of it was about her. Her lipstick smudged as she rushed out of her apartment, half dressed in a crimson top and leggings, adrenaline overriding dignity. She stormed into the cafe's courtyard just as Joseph stepped back inside. The door chimed. The crowd murmured. And then she shouted, How could you humiliate me like that? Joseph turned, caught off guard. Crystal Bell, she marched up, finger pointing, voice rising. After everything I gave, after I let you live in my heart like a king, you go and... But she didn't finish. Because Joseph responded softly, I never asked you to carry me. I just never stopped you when you did. That stunned her, but it wasn't his words that made her legs buckle. It was what he said next. I quoted something today from therapy, words I once repeated to you by mistake. They weren't yours. They were hers. You always knew that, didn't you? Her breath hitched, and in the next second, her knees gave out. Gasps echoed as a few people rushed to steady her. She had fainted, not from physical illness, but from the unbearable weight of realizing she was never the destination, only the detour. Joseph stepped forward, but didn't touch her. For the first time, he understood the difference between helping and enabling. As others carried her away, his eyes didn't follow her. They rested on the door Jennifer had exited through, quietly waiting, not for permission, but for possibility. 2 days passed before Jennifer reached out. Her message was short, just a time and location. 7:30 p.m. Crescent Book Lounge. Joseph arrived 10 minutes early, nerves bundled beneath a calm expression. He found her in a quiet corner of the bookstore cafe, a teacup in her hand, a worn book open in front of her. She didn't look up immediately, which gave him time to notice how much lighter she seemed, self-assured, grounded. Finally, she closed the book and met his gaze. You caught the world's attention, she said, a faint smile curving her lips. That wasn't my goal, Joseph replied softly. I just needed to say it, even if no one was listening. She nodded. Well, I heard it, and I believe you meant it. He leaned forward carefully. Then why am I here? Jennifer placed her cup down and looked him straight in the eye. To hear my truth, now that you've told yours. There was no venom in her tone, only clarity. You don't get to rebuild what we had. That's not what this is, but you do get to know that I'm okay. That I've healed, not because of you, but in spite of what we didn't finish. Joseph lowered his head. I don't want to go back. I just wanted a chance to show you I'm different. She nodded. You are, but I'm different too. She stood and adjusted her bag. You don't win me by kneeling, Joseph. You try, and then you wait. Not for me, but for life to reveal what comes next. As she walked out, she glanced over her shoulder. Don't chase, just keep becoming. And with that, she left him in silence, not the empty kind, but the kind that felt like an invitation to grow. A week later, Jennifer found herself standing at the shoreline of Noma Beach just before sunset. The wind danced around her, tugging gently at her scarf. Joseph approached quietly from behind, stopping a few paces away, not assuming an embrace, just presence. "You always came here to think," he said. She didn't turn around. Still do. For a moment, the sound of the waves filled the space between them. Then she spoke. "Do you regret it? Not just losing me, but everything that came with it." He answered without hesitation. "I regret not learning sooner, but I don't regret the process. It forced me to meet myself without your love as a shield." Jennifer turned then, facing him fully for the first time in weeks. "And who are you now?" she asked. He smiled, soft, unforced. "Someone who listens more than he speaks. Someone who understands that love is not owed, it's earned every day, through presence." She studied him, eyes steady. "Then let's not call this a reunion," she said. "Let's call it a recognition." They walked slowly along the beach, not holding hands, not needing labels, just a man and a woman who had once built something beautiful, lost it, and then learned to stand in its ruins with grace. As the sky darkened to indigo, Jennifer paused. "This doesn't mean we'll try again," she said. "It just means I see you clearly now." Joseph nodded, grateful. "And if all I'm allowed is to be seen by you, then that's already more than I deserve." They stood together as the tide rolled in, no longer enemies of their past, but travelers who had taken the long road back, not to each other, but to themselves. Here's the Bible verse, Proverbs 28, verse 13. "Whoever conceals their sins does not prosper, but the one who confesses and renounces them finds mercy." Explanation. This verse captures Joseph's journey from denial, deflection, and emotional concealment to honest self-examination, public accountability, and finally, growth. It reminds us that freedom and healing begin when we face the truth, not when we mask it. Moral of the story. Healing is not found in moving on quickly, but in sitting with the consequences long enough to understand what broke. The story teaches that love isn't measured by grand gestures or social validation, but by accountability, respect, and emotional maturity. While Joseph thought a new relationship would replace an old wound, he learned that peace only comes through owning your part in the pain and choosing growth with no guarantee of reward. Jennifer, too, showed that healing doesn't mean returning to what broke you. Sometimes it means becoming whole enough to see clearly, forgive freely, and walk away empowered.